Discovering Justice. My name is Lucy Rivera and I am your host today. And please look at our webpage, www.discoveringjustice.net, for information on this program and many of the other programs we have available. We'd like to hear from you, so if you have any questions, please contact me at lucinda.rivera@discoveringjustice.net or at lucinda.rivera@gmail.com. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Suni Thomas George, and she is the Commissioner of the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, also known as the MCAD. Welcome to our program, Suni.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And so tell us what made you go into civil rights, and what's your background that made you go in there?
Sure. Well, I am born and raised in the United States, but my parents were immigrants who came from India in the 1960s, in the early 1960s. And because of their immigration status and coming over here and having to face so many obstacles as being immigrants with the lack of the English language, the heavy accent, and not understanding the process and procedures of American government and American process, I've always had sort of an affinity for immigrants, and it's important for me that people know their rights and know when they take employment in Massachusetts, when they look for housing in Massachusetts, when they apply for a mortgage, when they seek admission into a school, when they go to eat at a restaurant or when they go to a movie theater, any type of place of public accommodation, that they know what their rights are and that they know they need to be free from discrimination. So for me, it's more a part of me. Since my parents were immigrants and many of my aunts and uncles have been immigrants to this country, I've seen a lot of the challenges that they faced in employment, and especially with discrimination like that. So
that's really interesting, Suni, and you're the commissioner of the agency, the MCAD. But what was your path to get there?
Okay, well, it was a very unusual path, actually. I went to, after undergrad, I went to law school at Western New England College School of Law in Western Massachusetts, where I grew up. After attending law school, during law school, my last year law school, I participated in the Massachusetts Anti-Discrimination Clinic, which was a clinic with the MCAD. So I really got some good experience and learned a lot about anti-discrimination laws. After the clinic was over, about 2 years later, I took my first job at the MCAD in the Springfield office, where I litigated cases, I performed trainings for the area businesses and schools, I heard lack of probable cause appeals. So I did a lot, and I was able to learn a lot from the investigations and just from the process there. I ended up transferring to the Boston office, and I sort of moved up the ladder that way, where I became a supervising attorney, and then eventually I was in a manager's spot. I became the chief of enforcement for a little while. It was about 2007 when the governor's office called and said, hey, we're looking for people to apply for this position. And Lucy, this is where it's important to note that this administration, Governor Patrick, was essential in understanding that this agency was an important agency with a very, very important mission, a crucial mission. And he understood, and his administration understood, that they didn't want just any commissioners, anybody to become commissioners. So they looked for people who had the right background, who understood civil rights laws, who understood what's needed in the communities, and who had a good understanding of the procedures and processes of what we do. And so I applied for the position and found out a while after that I got the position. So I was appointed by the governor in 2007, and then I was reappointed by Governor Patrick in 2009. And I have to say, it was the first time in the history of the MCAD that they took a rank and file employee and elevated them to the level of a commissioner.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
How long is the term? But you mentioned you to be reappointed.
A term is 3 years. When I first became a commissioner, I was appointed in 2007. The term was sort of midway in, so I had about 2 years left on the term. And so in 2009, in August, I was reappointed. So my term actually ends in August of 2012.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I commend you for the work you're doing
Thank
at
you.
the MCAD. But tell us, what should people know about anti-discrimination laws with the agency?
Well, people should know that we exist, that there are laws in Massachusetts that protect people from being discriminated, and not only in employment. Most of our cases are employment cases, but we also protect people from being discriminated in housing, public accommodations, credit, and in some areas of education as well. And who's protected? Well, people who have a different, almost everybody's protected. Let me put it that way. So you can't be discriminated against based on your race, your national origin, your color. You can't be discriminated against based on your disability or even having a perceived disability, your sexual orientation, your religious affiliation, ethnicity, creed. You can't be discriminated against based on your age, which is over 40. In Massachusetts, it's over 40. And we have other protected classes too, and we also protect it for criminal records, and we protect for sexual harassment. So those are some of the protected classes that we have.
Oh, wonderful. And I wanted just to ask you a little bit more about your responsibilities now that you are a commissioner.
Wow, well, there's a lot of responsibility there. The sort of day-to-day responsibilities are you investigate cases. So we have about 70 employees at the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. We have about a third of them are investigators. We have a number of attorneys that we oversee. We have hearing officers, and of course we have support staff. We have people who mediate and conciliate cases as well. So we have a big group. We have 4 offices. Our main office is in Boston. We have another office in Western Massachusetts in Springfield. We have a satellite office in Worcester and a satellite office in New Bedford. So we're pretty busy. Some of the day-to-day operations would be to oversee the case processing, oversee the investigations. You would review investigations and sign off on them. We also prosecute cases, so we have a number of attorneys that prosecute cases. You would serve as the investigating commissioner on a number of those cases. We also have hearing officers who hear cases, and even commissioners can hear cases as well. So I will preside over an administrative hearing and hear a case, take in evidence, have people interviewed and have witnesses cross-examined and direct examined, and then you'll make findings in a decision. So there'll be a public hearing decision that you'll write and put that forward. We also hear appeals. We sometimes do mediations and conciliations. We oversee our budget as well. We oversee any sort of legislative efforts that come out of the MCAD, that any type of bills that have to do with anti-discrimination laws. We have personnel issues that we always have to deal with too, and that does take a bulk of our time as well. So there's a lot of the day-to-day operations, almost like running an agency is almost like running a company. But the bulk of the work is the investigation, the prosecution, and the adjudication of our cases.
And your different offices, Springfield, New Bedford, Boston,
and Worcester.
And Worcester.
Yeah.
There are 4 of them.
There are 4 of them.
And people file according to where they live. That's
Yes.
where they would. Now, the protected classes, how would they go about filing a case at the MCAD?
Anybody can file a case at the MCAD. All you need to do is, at this time, you can just come into any of our offices. If you can't come in, you need some kind of reasonable accommodation where you need to have a complaint taken by phone. We can do that as well. We try to be as accommodating to everybody. But usually when you come into our offices, what you should bring with you is, what happened. Have a chronological list of what happened to you in your employment or in your housing, in what happened to you in your housing experience. Have a list with you. Make sure you have the name of your employer, their address, phone number, a contact person. Also, bring with you payroll records. If you think you've been discriminated against because someone else was paid, more or less than you, and you feel it's because of your protected class, because of your gender, or because of your sexual orientation, or your disability, you should bring in payroll records. You should bring in anything that the commission would need to be able to draft a comprehensive complaint. So if you look at our website, you can also find that information out as well.
And the process to file is they would first make a complaint with the MCAD.
Yep, they would come into our offices and they would meet with an intake worker. And the intake worker would talk about, you know, what they need, what happened, and it's also knowing the dates too, because what happens to you is going to be formalized and drafted into a complaint, into an actual formal complaint. So it would be good to have the dates, the people who are involved, not just first names but last names too, because you want to show that there's comparators there, and here's their name and their last name and what position they're in. And if you're naming people that you felt you know, harassed you or were responsible for the discriminatory treatment, you would want to know their names as well too.
Right. So we're here today with Suni Thomas George, and she is the commissioner of the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. They have 4 offices in Massachusetts, and we're just listening to the commitment that she has pledged to this organization and all the hard work. This mostly we're talking about protected classes and people who have a permit to work in Massachusetts. But what about those people who are often discriminated and are those who do not have documents, are here legally, and they are working? What about that class?
Sure. We make no distinction between documented and undocumented workers. We ask that you have some form of identification that just gives us where your address is. But other than that, we don't need any type of documentation. Anybody, like we said, anybody who's a resident of Massachusetts or who works in Massachusetts or who lives in Massachusetts can come file a complaint at any of our 4 offices. We don't make any kind of distinction because that's not important to us about whether or not someone is documented or undocumented. Discrimination is illegal regardless of, you know, whether you have paperwork or not.
Well put. And in order to enforce this, what type of investigation do you have in the with MCAD?
Sure.
Can you elaborate on?
Our investigative process is, well, after the intake, the case will be assigned to one of our investigators, either in our Boston office or in our Springfield office. Those are our 2 bigger offices, and we have more resources in those offices. Now, what will happen is you'll get an investigative conference within a few months, and they'll ask both parties to come to the investigative conference. So once a complaint has been made, the MCAD will then process and serve a copy of that complaint to the employer or to the landlord or the school or the business, place of business. So whatever the respondent is, whoever is the person who is alleged to have done the discriminatory act, they'll be served with a copy of the complaint. They have 21 days to answer the complaint. Once they answer the complaint, the complainant, the person who's bringing about the complaint, will have 21 to 30 days to file what we call a rebuttal. So it'll be a response to the response. So first there'll be a complaint filed, then the employer will probably file a response to that, and then the person bringing the complaint will be able to address that in their response as well. Once that happens, then the investigative conference takes place, where the parties will come in, and the investigator who's presiding over the conference will look to see what further investigation needs to be done. Does that person need to go to the place of employment or to the to the building to take a look at what's going on, to talk to witnesses, to see what happened, and to get sort of a blueprint of, did discrimination happen here? Or does it need other types of investigative tools, like do they need to propound interrogatories, which is just questions that say, hey, what happened here? Tell us a little bit more about this. Do they need to request more documents to come in? Maybe we need payroll records. Maybe we need other people's performance evaluations. Maybe we need to get some personnel files on this person or some other people. And other investigative tools might be, hey, is this a good case for mediation? Maybe there was a legitimate miscommunication going on here, and maybe this case could be resolved if it was mediated. So we have plenty of mediators that can also take the case and mediate as well. So those are some of the investigative tools that happen at the investigative conference. Once the investigative conference is completed, the investigator will then decide, after meeting with their attorney and the supervisor, who also work in the enforcement division, will decide how to next proceed with the case. Does it need further information, or can that person make a recommendation? Once that person makes a recommendation, the recommendation is reviewed by the supervisor and by the attorney who's advising that enforcement team. After that, a recommendation goes forth to the investigating commissioner, like myself, where I will then review the finding and decide whether I agree with it. If I agree with the finding, I will go ahead and sign off on it, and then we'll find either probable cause or lack of probable cause.
And there are some hearings that commissioners hear, you're the commissioner. What kind of cases get to you as a commissioner?
I've been at the MCAD now for 13 years, and I've seen and written and presided over many cases. In disability cases, we sometimes have cases where the employer fails to reasonably accommodate. We have race and national origin cases where there's harassment at the workplace and it creates a hostile work environment. I've certainly seen cases where there's sexual harassment. There are also cases in housing cases where the landlord might deny somebody as being a tenant because of their Section 8 status, or because of their status with children, or maybe because even their sexual orientation. So that is all illegal. So I've seen a large number of cases happen in different areas. But we do our best to investigate to see whether or not the law has been broken in these areas.
And in your agency, what do you think is the volume of cases that gets to the MCAD? Do you have an idea of what percentage of discrimination cases? Sure.
We process probably around almost 4,000 cases a year. And out of those 4,000 cases a year, about 20% of them, approximately 400 of them, go forward with a probable cause finding. And once a case gets probable cause, it means that the person who brought the case has been able to establish that there might have been a discriminatory practice, or there is a genuine issue of material facts, and therefore we can't make a decision of whether or not discrimination happened, and so it needs to go forward through our process. So once probable cause is found, it goes through a conciliation. Once there's a conciliation, we try to resolve the issues by trying to mediate the case. If it doesn't resolve there, it will then get what we call a discovery order, and it will go forward, and the parties are able to perform discovery, which means conduct depositions and send out interrogatories, talk to witnesses, get affidavits, and start to prepare for public hearing. So once that discovery period is done, we will always attempt to mediate and try to resolve the issues, through settlement that way. But if it can't be settled, then it will go to a public hearing, which is another duty the commissioners have at the MCAD, which is to oversee and hold public hearings.
Very interesting. And what are you doing to address the amount of, the volume of cases that you may get? You said 4,000.
Yeah.
How are you addressing any backlog or any?
Lots of cases.
Yeah.
Well, you're right, Lucy. We have a lot of cases that we get filed every year, and at certain times, based on our budget, we might have enough investigators to investigate, and sometimes investigators have caseloads from, anywhere north of 300 cases. So it's a lot of cases. But we do put in processes there to try to address the backlog. We will try to, like one of our new processes is to bring back the investigative conference, because we believe that when we bring back the investigative conference and it's automatic on every case, that each investigator will be able to sort of touch the case and figure out what needs to be done on the case at a very early stage, instead of put it in line and get to it after they've gone through so many other cases. So this way, when they address the case, they bring the parties in, and a lot of times the parties will talk to each other and they'll be able to settle the cases as well. So that's always helpful. We've done that. We have streamlined our processing a little more to try to make sure that the resources that the investigators need in order to thoroughly investigate the case is at their hands, and that they get the help they need to do that. I mean, hiring investigators, that's basically what we really need to do, and that's always based on whatever our budget is. And under this administration, we've had really good luck with our budget, and so mostly we haven't taken too many drastic cuts, so we're very thankful of that. And as you know, Lucy, in times of economic, hardships like this, like the times like this, budgets do get cut. It's part of the reality of state government. And this is the time, of course, where people start losing jobs or they get denied housing. And so whenever the economy is not doing very good, we see an increase in cases filed at the Commission.
And in order to address that, there must be a component of education for employers, just to educate them about what the law is, what is proper or improper. Is there a component of that at the MCAD?
We do. We actually have a training unit, and we have a director of training, and she's fabulous. And what we do is we make sure that we do outreach and education, and we go out there and we train businesses, and we train community groups, and we've also gone out there and trained human rights commissions as well, so they can be an eye and an ear, and they can hear and see what's going on in their community. They can encourage people to file cases. They can let people in their communities know what the law is. And for us as commissioners, we want to go out there as well and be able to educate people and train people, not only about what people's rights are, but we go and we meet with landlords, we meet with employers, small businesses, large businesses, and we say, hey, here's what the law states, and here's how you can do a better job. And here's where you can do such a good job that you won't be in front of the MCAD.
Wonderful. Education, I think, is
Yes.
the key most of the times. And now I wanted to talk to you about the CORI Reform and the new, that's a really important initiative. I wonder if you could talk to us about this new legislation.
Absolutely. CORI Reform, I think a lot of people are buzzing about it right now. The Commission, the MCAD, has jurisdiction over the Criminal Offenders Act, which is a statute under 151B, which is our anti-discrimination statute, where employers are not allowed to ask certain questions, either verbally or in writing, about criminal backgrounds, about arrests, prior arrests, convictions, to that nature. And so what the CORI Reform Act does is, in August, the governor signed new CORI legislation, and in November it went into effect. So our part in this is we drafted a fact sheet, which is on our website. So basically what happens now is when people go to apply for jobs, and mostly employers have been asking people about their criminal records background right on the application form. Well, we realize that when people see that and check off the box that they have a criminal record or they have some type of felony or conviction, that they might be, right off the bat, they won't be even entertained for getting this job. They won't even be looked at. So we realize, so with the CORI Reform, what it does is it allows those questions to be asked verbally or in writing, but only after the interview. So that's a large part of what it does. So that allows people to get in the door. And so employers are not able to ask those questions until the interview process. Now, the same types of questions are still illegal, and you can find that on our website, which ones still cannot be asked. But now these questions can't be asked until the time of the interview.
How do we find out all this information about the MCAD? What's the webpage?
We have a wonderful website, and you can go to our website either at www.state.ma.us/MCAD, or you can just go to www.mass.gov website, and we are one of the state agencies you can look up by our name. You can also call the MCAD, and we have an information line. Yes. We also have an attorney line that if you want not legal advice, but if you want to talk to an attorney about your rights, you can do that as well. That's 617-994-6000.
Wonderful. And in that webpage, there'll be a compilation of all the regulations and what you can do and you cannot do when you're hiring people.
Yep.
It's a great resource.
Yep.
And so we've run out of time, Suni.
Oh.
So I'm happy that you were able to be here with us today. And so for our public, and thank you for being with us today again. This was a very important part of our segment. And wanted to thank you and invite you to keep on following our programs, this program and many other programs in the past at www.discoveringjustice.net. www.discoveringjustice.net. My name is Lucy Rivera, and I am your host. And please contact me if you have questions about this segment, about Suni's job at the MCAD or any other of our programs. You can reach me at lucinda.rivera@discoveringjustice.net. So Suni, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Lucy, for having me. Thank you.
And, we hope to see you again.
Okay.
Thank you.